Hey y'all, welcome back to Sentro School. Today we'll be learning how to decrease on the Sentro. Decreases will allow you to create shaping on your project so you no longer have to purely rely on rectangles. This is a slightly more advanced technique, so if you're a total beginner, this might be a bit challenging, but once you practice it a few times, you should get the hang of it. I'll only be showing y'all one method of decreasing today, but I will explain a few other variations on this one method that we'll be going over. And one thing to keep in mind before we get started is that you can only decrease on a panel because with a tube, you need a stitch on every needle. So if you were to decrease your stitch count on a tube, you would no longer be able to have a stitch on every single needle. So with that, let's get started. You'll need a loom pick for this, and I have the same one linked in the description. It's super cheap and really an essential tool for the Sentro. So the way we'll work these decreases is sort of the same on each side, just mirrored, and you'll see what I mean when we get into it. So let's start on the right side of our project, and we'll be working the decreases at the start of our rows. I just think it's much easier to do it that way. So take your loom pick and take your yarn out of the yarn and tension guides and start cranking your handle like we are going to knit this other direction. And just crank your handle until this needle pops up just enough so that you can grab the stitch off of the needle. So take your loom pick and grab the stitch. And now we're going to crank our handle a little more so we can grab the next stitch. And one more time, crank your handle just enough so that you can grab this third stitch. So now you should have 3 stitches on your loom pick, and we are going to grab this inner stitch with our fingers and we're going to take it off of our loom pick and just hold on to it. Make sure to not let it go because it might unravel. Now this middle stitch, we're going to put that onto this first available needle. So just with your loom pick, put that middle stitch onto the needle. Now put this inner stitch that you were holding with your fingers back onto your loom pick, and we're going to put that stitch on the same needle that we just put that middle stitch onto. We're going to put it right on top. And now we have one final stitch left on our loom pick. This is our outside stitch, and we're going to put that onto the next available needle. Just like that. Now we want to kind of push our stitches down. We're going to bring our yarn under this ridge and then through the yarn and tension guides. Oops. Make sure that this is under that ridge. That's important. And now we are ready to knit, and we have decreased 1 stitch. Our project used to be all the way over to this needle, and we have combined 2 stitches onto this one needle, and we moved our outside stitch over onto the next needle. So now we can go knit across and go to the other side, and we will decrease again on the other side. So again, we're working our decreases at the start of our rows, so we had to go along and finish this row. So now we will turn back around like we're gonna start knitting a new row. We're gonna take our yarn out of the yarn and tension guides, and with our loom pick, we are going to grab the first 3 stitches. So there I grabbed one. Here is the second one. And the third one. So now on the left side of our project, it can be a little awkward if you are right-handed like me, because you're gonna have to get a little comfortable working with your left hand. So you're gonna put your loom pick in your left hand like this, and with your right hand, you're gonna take this innermost stitch and grab it with your fingers just like we did on the other side. It's just mirrored now, like I mentioned earlier. Grab that stitch with your fingers and hold on to it so it doesn't unravel. Now this middle stitch we're going to put onto this first available needle. And again, it's gonna be kind of awkward and maybe a little challenging at first. You're gonna have to get used to working with your left hand a little bit, which I know can be challenging. So there, I got it onto the needle, and now I'm going to pick up the inner stitch with my loom pick again, just so it doesn't come unraveled. I think it's a little easier to put it onto this needle with my loom pick rather than with my fingers. I'm gonna move my loom pick back into my right hand just because I think it's easier, and put that stitch on that same needle right on top. And then our outside stitch right here, we'll put onto the needle next to it. Just like that. And kind of push the stitches down a bit. Sometimes you might want to use your loom pick to help a little bit. And bring the yarn under this ridge and through the yarn and tension guides. And now we are ready to knit again. So we can go ahead and do this again on this other side, just so that y'all can see it again. I know it's a little complicated and confusing, so we can go ahead and do it another time. So take our yarn out of the yarn and tension guides, pop the needle up enough to grab the first stitch, grab the second stitch, and the third stitch. Grab the third stitch with your fingers, remove it from the loom pick, place the middle stitch onto the first available needle, place the inner stitch on top of that stitch, just like that, and then place the outermost stitch on the needle next to where you just made your decrease. Push the stitches down, bring your yarn around this ridge, and then through the yarn and tension guides, and we're ready to knit. Okay, here we can do it again on the left side one more time. We have our yarn out of the yarn and tension guides. We're gonna grab these first 3 stitches with our loom pick. Move the loom pick into our left hand, grab the innermost stitch with our fingers, place the middle stitch on the first available needle, then place the innermost stitch on top of that stitch, and then place the outermost stitch on the needle next to it. Push those stitches down, bring the yarn under the ridge, through the yarn and tension guides, and we're ready to knit. So I wanted to talk quickly about why we're placing our stitches down in that order. So here I have a little swatch I made earlier using this same method, and as you can see, it has this really nice looking line of stitches along either edge, and it just makes the panel look really nice and polished. And the way we get these nice lines of stitches is by placing that middle stitch down before we place the inner stitch down on the same needle, as well as just creating our decrease 1 stitch in on either side of our project. You see on the edge here, these are all of our outside stitches that we just moved 1 needle over. We didn't decrease any of these outside stitches, which makes this line of stitches where we did do the decreases more visible because it's like 1 in, so it's more kind of on the front of the project. It's more visible than if we did it along this edge. It also makes it easier to seam this panel to another panel if we wanted to, because we just have this really nice column of just plain old stitches along each edge of our project. I think this is a good segue into how to alter this decreasing method that I showed y'all today to get a different look on your finished project. So you're probably wondering what your project would look like if you didn't take this 3rd stitch off its needle. if it just stayed on here instead of you taking it off. And you just put this second stitch, the middle stitch, just right on top of the third needle. And then we put the outside stitch on the next needle over. So I actually have another little swatch so I can show you all what that would look like. So here you can see it just has a different look. It doesn't have that nice line of stitches along either edge, but we still have this kind of distinct edge because we're creating the decrease one stitch in. I prefer the look of this method, which is the method I showed y'all how to do earlier. I just really like this line of stitches here. I think it looks really clean, really polished, but you know, there's no right or wrong way. Obviously this still works. We still got the decreases, but it doesn't have this distinct line. So if you prefer the way this looks, then all you have to do is just don't pick up the third stitch. You'll put the second stitch directly on top of the third, and then you'll put the outside stitch on the next needle over. You might also be wondering what it looks like to work the decrease on the outside rather than one stitch in. So, you know, if you had just 2 stitches on your loom pick and you placed the outside stitch down first and then the second stitch on top of it, we don't have any other outside stitch to then put on this needle next to it. So this is what that would look like, where we put the outside stitch down on the needle first, and then we put the second stitch on top of it. So you see we have on the edge here this really nice looking line of stitches, but instead of having another row or column, I guess, of stitches next to it, this is just the edge. So, you know, it still looks really nice, and of course it still works, but it's gonna be harder for you to seam this to another panel. Whereas with this one, it's easier to seam because you have this column of stitches right next to your column of decreases. And I do have one final swatch I wanted to show y'all. So this is what happens when you just pick up the outside stitch and move it onto the needle next to it. You're not picking up 2 stitches and then kind of shifting the order of the stitches. You just pick up the outside stitch and move it onto the needle next door. So that's what I did for this swatch here, and of course it works, but I just don't think it looks nearly as nice as some of those other methods, especially the one that I was showing y'all on this little swatch here that we did earlier. Here is the method that I prefer, the one that I showed y'all, and compare it to this. This just looks so much better. So there are lots of different ways to decrease, and they're all very similar to one another, and it's really just up to you to decide what you like and what would be best for you and your project. But I definitely prefer that first method that I shared with y'all today. It's a little more work and a little more complicated, but it just looks so nice, so to me, it's worth it. So that's all for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, then be sure to leave a like, and if you enjoy Sentro content, then be sure to subscribe. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!